Bev.
And this is Diz.
And this is Trigger Warning. Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 2.
Yay! Welcome back, guys. It's Season 2, Episode 2.
We started out on a zinger of one last week. This one is actually a survival story.
Yay,
And
that's me clapping. Woo-woo! We like survival.
Let's hit the cheer button.
Cheers!
Okay, that's enough. Okay, there we go. So yeah, it's a survival story, and it is like it's crazy. It is crazy. I'm gonna get into it in a minute. First, I'm gonna do trigger warnings because we're back, and I'm better than ever.
And we got some trigger warnings.
And I got some trigger warnings. There's trigger warnings in this for violence against women, rape. Basically, the whole story is a trigger warning. So. I can't tell you too much about it, or you'll know the story before I tell it. But let's just say that it's rough. And I don't go into a lot of detail in the crime part of this, but there's enough there that it could definitely affect some people. Mm-hmm. So I will let you know when those parts are coming up specifically, and you can skip forward a little bit, or you can just skip the whole episode if you're not sure you can deal with it. The crime part's over pretty quickly, and then it's the aftermath. And the aftermath is less triggery, but still has, some moments here and there. But
right.
But definitely the crime part is the part with the rape and stuff in it, obviously. So that's the harsher part. So
got it. Okay.
All right. So let's get going here.
Yeah, tell us all about it.
So in the U.S. today, there are around 1 million people who are classified as legally blind. But legally blind doesn't mean that the person can't see anything at all. There are variations of what they can and cannot see. Some can see color, some can't. Some may have blindness in one eye, some may have it in both. Some may have been born that way, and others may have developed the condition due to an acute illness or a chronic disease.
Mm-hmm.
No matter your level of vision, you learn to adjust to it, and you adapt your behaviors around it so that it becomes your, quote, norm.
Right,
okay.
Got it.
So, let's assume, if you're listening to this right now, that you're an adult who has lived their life being able to see in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen your family and friends. Maybe you've had kids and you've been able to watch them grow. You've seen sunsets and watched the waves crash on the beach. You've been hiking in the mountains or watched the leaves change in the fall. You've driven a car or gone skiing or gone to an art show that changed your life or inspired you. You've cozied up on the couch and read your favorite book, or suffered through a horror movie marathon on Halloween. Now, if it's safe to do so, I want you to close your eyes, close them tight, and imagine if your world went dark in a split second.
No.
If you can, cover them up to block out any light that might peek through, and give it a couple minutes. I'll wait. Now, imagine that you open your eyes again, but instead of your world flooding back in, there's nothing. The darkness remains, and you know it's going to be dark forever. No shape, no light, no color, just pure darkness. On May 22nd, 1980, on a highway in Florida, Sharon Patyk Komlos lost her vision in a traumatic, bizarre incident. She knew instinctively that she would never see again. Sharon and her husband Wayne had been married for about 10 years when they decided to move from Cleveland, Ohio to Boca Raton, Florida. They left the cold winters and the gloomy weather of Ohio behind and headed for the Sunshine State, partly to relieve the suffering of allergies that one of their kids had. One of the boys. Their two boys, Sean and Mark, and their daughter, Kristen. Mark was the one that had the rough allergies. So, they were a small family that bought a house about 8 months prior to the event that led to her blindness. From all accounts, she and her family were doing well in their new house and in their community. At this time, Sean was 9, Mark was 7, Kristen was 3. Sharon was working with an insurance company as an outside claims adjuster and was well liked among her colleagues. One part of her job was to travel to local garages to assess damages to vehicles involved in collisions.
Okay. Yeah.
So she would assess the damage and report it back to the insurance so they could make an estimate on how much the claim would be, that kind of thing. She'd gotten to know a lot of the employees at like some of the body shops and built a good rapport with them. She was friendly and knowledgeable, and her no-nonsense attention to detail was an excellent skill for a claims adjuster. Sharon also dressed nicely for her job and was careful to avoid getting dirty when assessing the damaged vehicles. And some of the mechanics at the body shops teased her about it and teased her about getting grease on her clothes, but it was all in good fun. Just as she could see the damage on a vehicle and the crumpled pieces, she could also see their teasing as a sign of affection and friendship.
Aww.
She took pride in her appearance and made sure she maintained a professional look while performing her duties, even while remaining friendly and personable with the people that she'd come to see regularly. Sharon, at 31 years old, saw her position with the company as more than a job. It was a career path, and she was excited about it. So on the evening of May 22nd, 1980, Sharon was headed down the highway on her way home after a longer day than usual. She had already worked a full day with the insurance company. She'd picked up her kids from daycare. Again, Sean's 9, Mark's 7, Kristen's 3. After getting the kids, she drove them home and fixed them dinner. Then, rather than winding down, she headed back out. She had told her younger brother Rick that she would play tour guide for his girlfriend Tammy, who was going to be in town. And her husband Wayne hadn't really wanted to join them, so he stayed home with the kids. So now, after taking Tammy to see the sights, Sharon was driving home around 11 p.m. It had been a long day, and she was exhausted, and she was thankful because she was only about 10 minutes from home, traveling a road that she took to and from work every day.
Ugh.
The highway was fairly empty, except a car behind her that had one working headlight. The other headlight seemed to be aimed directly at her rearview mirror. So she was annoyed by the light reflecting in her eyes, and she let off the gas a little bit, hoping that if she slowed down a little bit, the car would change lanes and pass her. So, as she'd hoped, the car did change lanes, and it began to pass her. She continued to look straight ahead. Just as the car came up alongside her, she saw a flash of light out of the corner of her eye. And then there was nothing. Everything went completely black. She was traveling at 45 to 50 miles an hour, which is 72 to 80 kilometers an hour.
Oh my gosh.
She had been shot. The force of the bullet forced her body to the right, but she managed to keep her hands on the steering wheel, and she was able to move her foot from the gas to the brake. She couldn't see anything around her, but she knew she needed to get the car stopped before she hit something. So, to her left was the second travel lane, and then after that was a soft shoulder, the median between the highway lanes, separated the sides of the highway. But crossing the other lane of traffic, the same lane that the car had just passed her on, was a no-go, because she couldn't see if anyone was in it or coming up behind her. So, she basically did what she could. She hit the brakes. She carefully guided her car to the right side of the road and off the pavement.
Okay.
She didn't want to move it too far because she was afraid she'd hit a tree or end up in a canal. Because Florida.
Oh my gosh.
So, the car was new, and she didn't want to explain to Wayne why it had dents in it. And, she'd already damaged the car. Good Lord.
Oh my gosh.
So, once as she was coming off the pavement, she could hear the sound of the tires change when they went onto dirt as opposed to the asphalt. So once she was on level ground and no longer on the actual road itself, she threw the car in park. She left the ignition and the headlights on. Her first thought was to roll the driver's side window up, wanting the relative sense of security it would offer her. She searched for the switch for the electric window, but she also knew she needed to get help. She needed to get attention so that somebody could come and help her. She found the switch for the window, but her finger slipped off. She searched for it again, and she used her other hand to press on the horn while she's getting ready to roll up the window. She's laying on the horn, thinking she'll hold it down until somebody's like, what is this crazy woman doing? And they'll pull over. So just as the window began to go up, an arm reached through the window and pushed her back. And her hand fell from the steering wheel, and the man said, "My God, who did this to you?" He was obviously worried for her, and Sharon quickly told him that she thought she'd been shot and she needed a hospital. She explained that she couldn't see, and the man opened the car door and helped her out of the driver's seat. The car was on the right side of the highway, headlights on. Sharon's purse is still in the passenger seat. The keys are in the ignition and the engine is running. And the man lifted her and carried her to his car. And Sharon was like, good. She needed to go to the hospital. She knew this was bad.
Yeah.
So the man opened the driver's side door of his car and pushed the seat forward. And the car was really small, so he laid her in the back, kind of like in the floor in front of the back seat, because the back seat would have been kind of tinier.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more like in the floor in front of the seat.
Okay.
And then her head was resting on the actual seat itself.
Okay.
So she, at this point, she knew she was about to get help, so she took a moment and actually felt for wounds. Her eyes were shut, and they were swollen, but she didn't feel pain in them. And when she'd seen the flash of light, she said there hadn't been any pain. So she wondered, since there wasn't pain, she's like, am I in shock?
Right. Wow, what a grace under pressure.
Yeah. She's like, am I in shock? What, was I shot? I think I was shot. She said after feeling the stickiness on the blood on her hands, she realized her head and her hair were covered in blood.
Oh my gosh.
Her next thought was, I must be a complete mess.
Oh
Thank God I can still think. So she was already thinking, am I in shock? I can think. So there's not brain damage. So the man who'd rescued her spoke up. He said he was new to the area. He didn't know his way around too well. He asked if there was a hospital close by and if she could give him directions. So she directed him to Holy Cross Hospital, having heard that it had one of the best ERs in the area. She explained that he would need to turn the car around and head back the other way, heading east until he made it to Federal Highway. And she told him that if he wasn't sure where he was going or if he thought he was getting off track, he should ask her so she could guide him there. Because even though she's only been in town 8 months, she's been a claims adjuster for those 8 months. So she's driven all over the place.
Right.
So then he had his instructions. She thought, okay, let me assess what I've got going on here again. She asked herself again, am I in shock? So I looked up the definition of shock because some people, you hear it in TV shows and stuff like that.
You think you know what it is?
Yeah. So according to the Cleveland Clinic, shock is a life-threatening condition that happens when your body doesn't get enough blood flow. Reduced blood flow to your organs can cause them to fail due to lack of oxygen. Shock can also lead to a lack of oxygen in your body's tissues called hypoxia and can cause your heart to stop, which is called cardiac arrest. So if you've been injured like this and you're losing blood, going into shock is deadly.
Okay. Oh, Lord.
Sharon remembered seeing people in shock, and she said that they had seemed like they were irrational, but she felt like she was able to think clearly. So, silently, she tested out the portions of her body. She could move both of her hands. She'd been able to stand up when he'd helped her out of the car.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't remember when she stood up if she'd been able to feel her feet. So, her rescuer had picked her up so quickly that she hadn't really had that moment to think about that.
Right.
So, lying on the floorboards of this little tiny car, she wiggled her toes inside of her shoes, and that confirmed that, yes, she could still feel her feet. Doing all of this, she realized, well, it's obvious she's thinking rationally. That's good.
Yeah.
Again, she kept thinking, do I have brain damage? Am I in shock? She was assessing herself the whole time. It seemed like, from her injuries and stuff, everything it worked except her eyes. She couldn't see. And instinctively, she knew it was permanent. And her intuition was usually right, and the pit in her stomach told her she already knew that she was permanently blind. So her thoughts were interrupted when the man in the driver's seat mumbled to himself about coming up to a red light. And Sharon told him to run the light. She said if you're pulled over, he could explain the emergency and the police could help. So, excited about the prospect, she began to raise her head, but the man encouraged her to lie back down. The more she moved around, the more she would bleed, and it was important for her to try to remain relaxed. He told her he'd been a medic, and he was like, you got to keep your blood pressure even.
Yeah.
Don't move around too much. Don't try to sit up. Just rest.
Mm-hmm.
So she did as he instructed, and she had noticed that she did become more dizzy when she was trying to get up. So she decided to give him her information in case she lost consciousness before they got to the hospital. And then she decided she would lay down. So he reminded her to talk slowly, keep her head down, relax. And then he sat there as she told him her name, that she had 3 kids, told him their names and ages, and to have the hospital call her house so they wouldn't worry.
Oh.
As she was beginning to feel faint, she abruptly asked him what kind of car he was driving. She was trying to keep the conversation going so she could keep herself conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And when he asked why she wanted to know, she told him she was a claims adjuster, and she said she was curious to see if she was guessing the make and model correctly. So she was quizzing herself to try to keep herself conscious. She knew, she told him, I know it's a small car and I know it's an older model. He told her it was actually a friend's car, but he thought it was a 70 or 71 Maverick. The casual conversation seemed out of place in the situation, but it wasn't long before Sharon was once again reminding him to tell the nurses to call her house upon their arrival, to call and let her husband and her kids know that she was okay and what was going on. She told him that she'd moved to Florida only about a year before, but she really liked it and she enjoyed the warmer weather. He told her he was from up north too, and Sharon could easily hear his New York accent. So after another mishap with the directions, Sharon decided to lie still, gave him the quiet to concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
She thought maybe her talking was interrupting
Too
him,
distracting.
while he was trying to figure out how to get where he needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
She heard him cross train tracks, and she knew he was not on the way to Holy Cross Hospital. He'd obviously missed another turn. By now, she was okay with it. She knew if he continued down the road, there was another hospital coming up, and that they could go to that one instead.
Mm-hmm.
So, instead of telling him that he'd made a mistake, she spoke up and thanked him for helping her, and she told him she could have died if he hadn't stopped to help her. Sharon knew he was new to town, after all. She didn't have, he didn't have to help her. She was a complete stranger, and she said many people would have been reluctant to do so, and it made her happy that there were still people out there that cared about others. When he told her they were almost there, she began to think about what she would tell the doctors and nurses. She no longer felt like she was going to lose consciousness, so she was sure she'd be able to explain everything herself. She knew that she'd been shot by someone from the car that passed her on the left, but she didn't know why someone would want to kill her. It was then that she wondered if this act of violence was somehow related to the Miami riots in Overtown that had ended a few days before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm not going to explain the riots here because I'm planning on doing an episode about that on its own. But
Okay.
she put the thoughts in her mind in order. Everything she would tell the nurses about contacting her husband and kids, and anything she could tell the police about being shot while driving on the highway. She just wanted her kids to know she was okay. She couldn't see, but she was so relieved that there was no brain damage. She even thought of the mechanics that teased her sometimes. They would make jokes about not having anything up there to damage anyway because she was a blonde. So she said they were fond of dumb blonde jokes. So she's like, if they could see me now. And so they would make the dumb blonde jokes, and she'd tell them, we'll see who's dumb when you work from my estimate. They would tease her about grease stains on her skirt and her perfect hair and her makeup, and she wondered what they'd say if they could see her with blood all over her hair and face and hands. And so it seemed like forever. Her Good Samaritan finally stopped the car, put it in park, and announced that they had arrived. She told him to go inside and let them know that she needed a stretcher and that she'd been shot in the head and couldn't see, and to have the nurse call the police. Sharon heard him open his door, and he told her to rest for a second while he went inside. So it was pretty quiet, but Sharon knew it was late by this point, and the hospital must not be very busy. So moments later, sound of footsteps come back, and the man opened the door again. He told her there'd been a car wreck on the interstate, and there were no stretchers available, and asked her if she could walk if he helped her to go inside. She agreed, and she was just anxious to get inside and get help. So she's like, okay, I think I can walk, that's fine. So he helps her out of the car. Sharon took a moment to stretch her legs out because they'd been basically kind of folded up under her in this tiny little car.
Mm-hmm.
So with one arm around her waist, he steadied her with both hands and led her toward the entrance. Sharon held her hands out in front of her, using him as to direct her and stabilize her, and then she just held her hands out to make sure she didn't run into anything.
Okay.
That's got to be terrifying.
Yeah. It's all terrifying to me.
So the door opened and they stepped inside, and the man kind of nudged her forward a little as the door closed behind him. And then she heard the door lock. From her book, Feel the Laughter, she wrote a book called Feel the Laughter. This is how she describes that moment. Quote, with that sound, my feelings of security in the company of my Savior changed. In a split second, I felt his hands shove me down on a mattress. He was no longer concerned about my dizziness, or that I just might lose consciousness. He did not care if I started to bleed again or not. I tried to get up. He shoved me back down again. I screamed for the very first time. This is not a hospital. My God, where am I? End quote. So she had been rescued by the same man who had shot her on the highway.
How come I knew that?
Yeah.
How come I knew that?
So her rescuer turned to attack her, put a pillow over her face, and Sharon began to fight for her life again. She twisted and turned, getting just enough air here and there to keep breathing. And then she remembered her shoes. She was wearing heels. So she reached down and felt the buckle of her shoe. And after unfastening it, she pulled it off and held onto it by the front of the shoe. And then, with the heel sticking out, she began to strike her attacker repeatedly as hard as she could with the heel of her shoe.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm like, you are badass.
Yes.
To think about that.
In the
to
middle
be
of
bendy
being
enough
attacked.
to flex down and reach your shoe. Anyway.
Well, to be wearing heels to begin with.
Yeah. So it was effective enough. He actually removed one hand from the pillow to grab the shoe from her. And she took the opportunity to put an arm under the pillow and push it away from her face. And she screamed, "Hey, wait a minute." And he stopped. And he looked at her. And in a calm voice, he asked, "What's the matter?"
Creepy.
Sharon told him that he was suffocating her. She couldn't breathe. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And for a moment, nothing happened. And she was confused because he had apologized to her for almost suffocating her. So he'd obviously known he was doing something wrong. But she didn't understand why he'd done it in the first place. And that's when she realized that he had been the one behind her. That the car that was behind her could have been a Maverick. So suddenly she knew it was the same car. And when she heard it, when it was overtaking her, it sounded exactly like the car he was driving. And it just dawned on her. She hadn't picked up on it before because she'd been too desperate to get help. And she believed in the innate kindness of other people. And now she was afraid it would cost her her life. So the TV came on right behind her head, but the man was standing at her feet, so she realized he must have a remote control device. Keep in mind, this is the 1980s. Remote controls are not that common.
No.
You're still getting up and walking to the TV to change the damn channel.
Right.
So he's standing at her feet, but the TV's behind her, so she knows he turned it on with a remote control. The TV was loud enough to hear in the apartment, but low enough that it wouldn't disturb neighbors. She heard him moving around, and then she sensed him moving toward her again. And she felt like the calmer she remained, the calmer he would be. She heard him doing something that sounded like someone rummaging around in a medical kit. And the image of a doctor's black bag came to her mind, the ones that doctors used to carry when they made house calls.
Yeah.
So the man had told her on the way to the hospital he'd been a medic before, and she wondered if he had one of those medical kits. Then she suddenly felt a pressure on her chest, as if she'd been injected with something. A feeling of dizziness came over her, and she thought she might pass out. So, staying quiet, she just lay there, allowing her sense of hearing and touch to make up for her eyes. She felt more areas of pressure, over and over, to her arms, the side of her neck, her legs. She was too weak to fight back, but she felt like she was somewhere else. She felt the bed become wet and sticky, and she assumed it was from her blood, and she was right. She began to feel very cold. The man was moving around the room. She wondered what he was doing. She wondered if he was confused or trying to figure out what to do next. And he was mumbling to himself, loud enough for her to hear over the TV, but not loud enough to make out the words.
Mm-hmm.
And she realized she didn't want to know what he was thinking. She was afraid to ask him. She'd been shot, nearly suffocated, and the pressure over her body, she wondered if those were stab wounds. So, along with the TV and the occasional car passing outside, she listened to him move around the space until she heard the unmistakable sound of him unbuckling his belt and unzipping his pants. And this is where the trigger warning comes in. So she's shivering. She laid there. She's unable to do anything to stop what was about to happen. She knew what was going to happen. She had nothing that she could cover herself up with. And she was afraid that any objections or fighting would provoke him.
Mm-hmm.
So she was helpless. And she knew that rape was the next logical step. In her book, she said, next to murder, rape was, quote, the ultimate expression of male violence, end quote. And that is absolutely on point.
Absolutely.
He raped her anally, and she said it was the first time she felt pain that night. Her eyes were too swollen for her to cry. She kept telling herself that it had to end sometime. It would be over soon. All she had to do was survive this one additional act of violence. When he was done, he said, "How was that? Did you like it?" At first, she didn't answer him. She thought there's no way in a million years that this man would actually expect her to answer after he just violently raped her. But then he asked her again, and when he did, she said he sounded more anxious. So she decided she would try to find out a little bit more about what made him tick, hoping any information she gained would help her down the line. So she mumbled something like, sure, because that was the most she could manage
Forced
to
out.
give him,
Mm-hmm.
and then said, I'm cold. And the man said, here, honey, let me help you. And he covered her up with a cold, damp comforter. She said the blanket was heavy, but it didn't help her feel warm. It was damp. But she didn't say anything about it. She just didn't want to anger him. He stood up and he started talking to himself again, and Sharon heard the door open, or heard a door open. When he came back, she heard the whine of a dog. And he sat down on the bed with the dog in his arms and asked her, is that okay? Sharon had no idea what he was talking about. She decided to take control of the conversation. She wanted to remind him that she was a mother and that her world was outside of his torture chamber, as she called it. So instead of answering him, she asked him out of the blue, how are the children? He told her they were fine. Then he paused a little and said, what children? And she said, how's the baby? He told her the baby was fine and that it was sleeping. There was a pause, and then Sharon heard him mutter softly, do you have children? You're a mother. So he stopped talking then. He sat down on the floor with his head on the mattress. As the TV played, he'd sometimes touch her foot and then her ankle. Sometimes he'd slide his hand over her body and touch her breast. She could feel him touching her, but she couldn't fight him.
Mm-hmm.
Between the blood loss, the injuries from the stab wounds, the lack of sleep, possibly being injected with a drug, she was exhausted. So she felt him touch her wrist and hold it for a moment like he was checking her pulse. But she kind of just let her mind drift at that point.
Yeah.
She started thinking about her kids. She wondered if she'd ever be with them again. She was determined to survive, but she had to work out a plan to do so. She lost consciousness thinking about her kids. When she woke, she could hear him snoring. He wasn't on the bed with her, and she considered trying to escape. But she didn't know how deeply he was asleep, and if she woke him, he might wake up and attack her, or he might be calm. She didn't know which version of him she was going to get. So she just laid still and listened to the sounds around her. The street sounds were quiet, and the cars were passing very seldomly, so she knew it was still very early in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Even if she managed to get up without waking him, could she find a phone and call the police before he woke up? Could they trace the call before he called her on the line? Would she be able to find the door? She had no idea what the layout of the room was.
Right.
She decided she'd wait until morning, until the world had woken up a bit, before making an attempt. So when she woke up again, the sounds of the traffic outside confirmed that morning had arrived. People were up and moving around, commuting to work and continuing with their busy lives. The man was already awake and moving around the apartment. Sharon had a fit of uncontrollable coughing and asked the man for a tissue to blow her nose. Because if you think about when she got shot, it was all in her sinuses. There was blood and stuff all in her sinuses. He brought her back one individual square of toilet paper to blow her nose. It's like a child trying to do what he was asked to do, but not really knowing what to do.
How to do that.
So she was patient and polite. She asked if she could have a wet washcloth to wipe the blood and mucus from her face. So when her coughing subsided, she went limp and she fell back on the bed. The man was moving around the room again. He put the dog back in its room, confining it so it couldn't move around the apartment freely. She heard water running where she assumed the bathroom must be. Then she heard a plastic bag being unfolded over her as she lay on the bed. She coughed again and tried to listen to him, wondering what he was putting in the bag. As she lay still, she heard gun shells being shaken from a gun and tossed into the trash bag. Next, he pulled the remains of her blouse off of her. She hadn't realized it was still actually attached to her left wrist by the cuff. So she heard her clothing being slid into the bag. He lifted her arm and removed her watch. And Sharon let her arm fall limply back to the bed. And she heard the watch go in the bag as well. She heard the jingle of car keys. And then everything went silent, including the TV, which he switched off. Sharon imagined him standing in the room, looking around for anything else that might be hers. He walked over to her again and lifted her right wrist, holding it between his fingers, checking for a pulse. When he let go, Sharon, again, let it fall to the bed, limply. She let her body remain motionless, and tried to show no signs of life. He turned and walked away, moving faster this time, as if he were more confident in his decision. The door opened and closed. He either locked it from the outside or jiggled the handle to make sure it was locked behind him. Sharon lay completely still. Had he just gone outside to throw away the trash bag and wasn't planning on being gone long? Was he messing with her? If she moved, would he suddenly barge back in knowing she was alive? But then she heard the sound of the Maverick's engine. She heard it shift into gear and listened as it faded into the sounds of the other traffic. She knew this was her one chance, but she didn't know how much time she had. Ignoring her dizziness, she got up from the bed with the goal of finding a window. She was pretty sure that the door had been locked from the outside, and assumed that her best bet was to crawl out through a window. She reached out and found a wall and began to follow it with her fingers. One wall was covered in a piece of fabric, so she couldn't get out through that window. Then she felt heavy doors over a set of what she assumed was windows. She could feel the warmth of the sun behind them, but they would be too difficult for her to get through. So, listening to the sound of traffic, she found her way to the actual door. She reached for the handle. She was afraid it was locked, but to her relief, when she turned the handle, the door opened. Sharon had always been a bit bashful, she said, but at that moment she was prepared to make a scene. So, naked and covered in blood, she stepped out into the sunlight. She screamed as loud as she could, but no one stopped. She felt around and discovered a fisherman's landing net, and decided if she had to, she would throw it into traffic to force someone to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So, as she picked it up to do that, she heard a man behind her. And he said, "My God, who could have done this? I'll help you and I'll take you to the hospital." Her guard went up. Her attacker had said almost verbatim those words to her. She demanded to know this guy's name. He told her his name was Charlie, and asked her if she had any clothes, and again asked her who had done this to her. Sharon told him that she thought the man who did this to her took her clothes. Then she insisted to Charlie, she said that he could come back at any moment and they needed to get out of there immediately. Charlie said he was on his way to work when he saw her screaming, so he put her in the passenger seat of his work van and he got in himself. She realized after she asked his name and everything that it was a different voice and that it was not the man that had picked her up before. So she decided if she wanted to get help, she had to trust someone again, you know. So she sat in the passenger seat trying to cover herself, noticing that the blood was still oozing from the puncture wound in her chest and that her hair was stiff and matted with dried blood. When the doctors and nurses came out, the doctor asked Sharon if she could point out where her injuries were. There was so much blood on her that they actually could not see her wounds. So she pointed the gunshot wound in her temple. It had actually entered her face on the left side at the corner of her eye and exited the right side in the same place. As it passed through her head, it physically destroyed her eyes. It passed through the actual eyeball on both sides. So her eyes were not working because they were physically destroyed by this bullet, basically.
Oh my gosh.
The pressure she had felt on her chest was a stab wound, as she suspected. Luckily, it had missed her heart, her aorta, and her lungs. The pressure on her neck was also a stab wound, but it was superficial. Her attacker had basically cut her all over and literally sliced her from head to toe. When the nurse was cleaning off the blood, she told her that she had blood between her toes. She was so covered in blood, she had blood between her toes. So the doctor ordered consults from ophthalmology, neurosurgery, and cardiovascular surgery. When Sharon informed him that she'd also been raped, he ordered them to put in a call to the Rape Crisis Center as well. Sharon tried to joke with a nurse about being taken back immediately instead of having to wait in the ER waiting room, but no one was laughing. They didn't realize her sense of relief at being in the hospital finally getting the medical care that she needed from the moment that bullet had hit her. She was so relieved, she was making jokes, and they were just like, they couldn't possibly think about that right then. When they first examined her eyes, she could feel the warmth from the flashlight bulb, but couldn't actually see the light. Sudden, unfamiliar voices would speak up, alerting her that another specialist had entered the room. The cardiovascular surgeon looked at the stab wound to her chest and said it didn't look like surgery would be needed, but they would do x-rays just to be sure. A neurologist arrived, touched her feet to check for a reaction. She explained to him what had happened as well, and knew she didn't have any neurological damage, but she knew the exam was a precautionary measure. A woman's voice came from her right side, a woman from the Rape Crisis Center. So the woman asked her if she needed anything, and Sharon asked if anyone had called her husband yet. Before the woman left, she asked Sharon if she wanted to prosecute for the rape. She explained the procedure for collecting evidence. Basically, a doctor would do the internal examination, and she would stand by to witness and document the findings. Sharon's response was yes, and she told the woman she didn't realize that they would need her permission to prosecute. Over the years since this, Sharon has actually become a victim's advocate, and the way that rape cases are handled can be kind of frustrating. Mm-hmm. So, get into that a little bit more later. But so, after agreeing to the rape examination, the rep from the Rape Crisis Center thanked her and told her she'd check on whether or not her husband had been contacted and have someone let her know. After x-rays of her head and chest, Sharon's next visitors were 2 detectives from Fort Lauderdale Homicide Division. Detectives Doug Haas and Vicky Russo, which sound like freaking detective names, let me just tell you.
For sure.
They introduced themselves and explained that they would be investigating her case, and they assured Sharon that they would do everything they could to find her attacker and bring him to justice. Detective Haas told Sharon that they would need a statement from her as soon as she was feeling up to it, but Sharon insisted on giving her statement right then and there. She explained that she was an insurance adjuster, and she knew that people's memories started to fade with time. She wanted to talk now while she still remembered details from the night. So she started at the beginning and described everything from the Maverick with one headlight to the drive to the hospital, the puppy in the apartment, the man's height and weight, the trash bag, the items she believed he put in it, and everything she felt along the walls when she was trying to escape. When she was done, she was more exhausted, her mouth was dry, and she told herself that she had done her part. She had told them basically everything that she could, and it was up to them now to catch him. The detectives told her they would get started with the information she gave them, and then they'd get a recorded statement later. So after thanking her for her cooperation, they left. Sharon's survival of both the shooting and the brutal rape and stabbing afterward was miraculous on its own, obviously.
Right.
But her survival went beyond the events of that night and the medical treatments she went through the next day. The instant that bullet passed through her eyes, Sharon lost her eyesight completely. Her eyes were essentially destroyed, and in fact, she got new fake eyes later, and she was excited to get blue eyes instead of green eyes like she'd had before. And then she says, well, I hope they gave me blue.
Oh goodness.
She never lost her sense of humor. They did, by the way. I've seen pictures of her. She got blue eyes.
Yay.
There isn't a lot of information about the human shit stain that was the guy that attacked Sharon that night.
Yeah.
We do know who he is, however. The police found him quite easily. His name is Thomas Edward Rossi. He was from New York and had moved to Fort Lauderdale area about a year before the attack. He went on trial for the attack on Sharon, and she testified against him. And this is, keep in mind, a man whose face she had never seen and would never see. The man who had shot her, pretended to rescue her, stabbed and raped her, and thought he had killed her. She couldn't see him, but she could still take him down. She told every detail of that night to the pitch blackness, a courtroom and a jury box full of strangers. And as she said in her book, quote, all they wanted to hear was the story until I entered the hospital. The pain and suffering and surgery and deprivation and lost job and lost income and frustration and extra effort and injuries to my family were not part of my story in the criminal justice system. So when she testified, she only testified up until the part of the story where she was in the hospital and was, I guess, quote unquote, safe. And then they didn't question her any further. She was not actually allowed in the courtroom during the trial, except during her testimony. And this is because they decided that having the blinded victim of the defendant in the room could bias the jury against him.
Are you freaking kidding me right now?
Right. It's like, oh yeah, well, he blinded you, and if they see a blind woman, then it might bias them against him.
Oh my gosh.
So, her husband went to court every day, but she stayed home. And actually, when she went in to testify, her lawyer asked her if she had her cane with her, like the walking stick that you see that has the white tip on the end. And she said, yeah, and he said, use it. So I guess he was doing the garnering sympathy thing from her then. But anyway, so she stayed home. Wayne went to the court every day, and he would tell her anything that was interesting that developed from the trial. But she couldn't actually be there to listen to the witness testimony or to hear how the police had identified Rossi or found him or what evidence that had been found. Rossi was pleading not guilty by reason of insanity, and Sharon didn't even know if the evidence that the prosecution had proved that he knew what he was doing. Since she couldn't go to court, she didn't know how much they had and whether he would actually get convicted. She had no doubt about his capacity or his insanity or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He had kept her lying down in the back of his car so she wouldn't be seen, under the guise that he wanted her to keep the bleeding down. He had gathered her clothes and the shell casings and put them in a trash bag to dispose of. He had checked her pulse a few times to make sure she was dead before he left the apartment. He knew what he had done was illegal, and he made steps along the way to cover it up and not get caught.
Absolutely, he did.
So he knew what he was doing was wrong. He was mentally capable of that.
Right.
He was not insane,
no.
criminally or otherwise, at that point. So, after the judge gave the jury their final instructions and they left to deliberate, she was finally allowed to be present in the room because, of course, by then, she couldn't sway their decision by basically being the woman that he blinded.
That's so stupid.
So, anyway, the jury found him guilty because he was guilty as hell. He was sentenced to 104 years in prison.
Dang right.
After the trial, Sharon could no longer be a claims adjuster. She couldn't drive. She couldn't visually inspect vehicles and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So she decided to pursue insurance sales. She had a great personality for it and that kind of thing. And I'm sure back then there was a lot less computer work.
Right.
So she could write as she'd been doing for the last 31 years. So unexpectedly one day, she was invited to speak at a women's luncheon about what had happened to her. And she was surprised, but she agreed to do so. And she nailed it. That speaking engagement led to others, and soon she began getting advice from professional speakers about travel and keeping her calendar full, but she didn't want to make a career out of the professional motivational speaking if it meant never being around her kids.
Mm-hmm.
She accepted some speaking engagements and declined others. She got paid for some. The max amount was around $500, but many of them were free. She did them for free. She spoke to high schoolers and women's groups about sexual assault and how women were blamed for being victims of rape. In an article from the Tallahassee Democrat from 1989, she said, quote, "It's very difficult for a woman to prosecute a rape case. Her past history is dredged up while the criminal's isn't," end quote. And sadly, that's still the case sometimes.
It really can be.
All they do is they want to know about her sex life, her dating life, what kind of clothes they wear. Does she go out drinking at night? Does she put herself in situations where she's asking for it, essentially, is what she was saying. After one of her speeches at a high school, a 15-year-old girl actually stopped once and thanked her and told her she'd been raped the year before and that Sharon had helped her so much. And she'd only wished she'd heard from her a year earlier.
Oh, wow.
So Sharon, this is another quote from the book. She said, quote, "Unashamed, the girl reached out and gave me a big hug. I felt that any words that I would speak now would be inadequate. Thank you for sharing that with me. I think you'll be just fine." How horrifying, I thought, but how true, how real. This little girl, 15, and a complete stranger that gave a speech is how she finally was able to start to heal from what had happened to her. Before the crowds were dismissed at her speeches, Sharon would open the floor to a handful of questions from her audience. It was only like 2 or 3 speeches in that she realized she didn't have the answers to some of the questions that she was asked most often. And that was about the man who'd done all this terrible shit to her.
Mm-hmm.
So since she hadn't been in the courtroom, she didn't know the details about her case, the things that she should have known. So she reached out to one of the detectives on the case, Doug Haas, and asked for details about how they apprehended Rossi. He told her that they interviewed Charlie Greenwood. He was the man who'd actually taken her to the hospital. He remembered which balcony she'd been screaming from when he saw her, and so he told the police that exact location. The police got their search warrants and went in the apartment, but it had been cleaned, kinda. Very kinda. Rossi had turned the mattress over and made the bed, but they flipped it back over and found bloodstains on it.
Oh my god.
Yeah, apparently this guy was not a genius. Sharon's fingerprints were also on the walls, and they found the remote for the TV. Again, not super common for people to have in the 80s. And the window with the fabric that was stretched over it that she felt, that was in the apartment too. They knew they had the right person. So they found a personal address book and started calling the phone numbers in it and asking for Tommy. And I assume that they got his name from, like, the lease on the apartment or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Maybe he had mail in the apartment. I don't know. So they start calling all these names in this address book of his, asking for Tommy. So someone finally answers and says Tommy's asleep. And they said, don't wake him, we'll try him back later. Then they ran a trace on the number, got the address in North Miami Beach, and had the police there stake out the place. They apprehended Rossi as he was running through a wooded area with the plastic trash bag that held Sharon's clothes and the shell casings.
How nice of him to bring it with him.
Yeah. Then they searched his car, and they brought him back to Fort Lauderdale. Detective Haas had told her that Rossi had a history with the police back in New York. In 1970, he hit a woman on her bike to disable her and then returned, posing as a good Samaritan, and offered to take her to the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
He then brutally assaulted and raped her and left her in a shallow grave. Miraculously, the woman survived, but she was seriously psychologically traumatized. He was sent into prison for that crime, but only served part of his term before being released on parole. He then assaulted another woman in the back seat of his car. The second woman didn't want to prosecute due to personal reasons. But he was returned to prison because it was a parole violation that he attacked another woman. And so he served out the rest of his sentence. Apparently it wasn't much, because when he was released, he moved to Florida. And a year later, he saw Sharon and decided she would be his next victim. So, at her request, Detective Haas also played the recorded statement Rossi had made at the time of his arrest. In his story, he had been at the bar drinking and was offered a pill, likely a Quaalude, and then was traveling down Federal Highway when he claims he saw a woman spin out in her car. Her car spun out. He supposedly stopped to help her. There was no blood and she was not injured. They drove around for a while and then went back to his apartment and had sex, and she fell on a knife.
Multiple times?
Apparently.
Multiple times she fell on a knife?
Apparently. And I'm like, you think that this well-put-together woman wants to have sex with you?
Right?
Yeah. Sharon discovered that she was basically a random victim. He saw her on the highway that night and just chose to attack her.
Ugh.
In her search for information, Sharon decided to request the court transcripts as well. The documents had actually been sent at that point to West Palm Beach 4th District Court of Appeal to the Assistant Attorney General. She called to request the records. They told her it was well over 1,000 pages and it would cost 25 cents per page. Money was tight, of course. She was no longer working full-time. The speeches weren't paying much, if anything. $250 at least was not in the cards to buy court transcripts.
Wow.
So she called the Assistant Attorney General that would be handling the case for the appeals process and explained that she would like to get a copy of the transcripts. He told her that after the appeal hearing on February 1st, 1982, she could likely get a copy. When she told him how much it would cost, he told her that Rossi would get a copy of the transcripts for free to aid him in his appeal. So she would have to pay $250 to get the court transcripts, but the man who had blinded her and assaulted her got them for free because he needed to appeal his case. She was beyond frustrated. Rossi didn't have to pay for rent or food or medicine or clothing. He didn't have kids to care for or support financially. And he wasn't blinded at random by a repeat rapist and attempted murderer. But he could get the records for free. She would have to cough up $250. $250 in 1980, adjusted for inflation, is around $960 today.
Oh my
by the way.
gosh.
So that's like if you went to the court right now and asked for transcripts, and it would cost you almost $1,000.
And you're the victim.
And you're the victim. It's like the court transcripts wouldn't even exist if it hadn't been for you and him doing that to you.
Yeah.
Sharon would end up getting the transcripts for free, FYI. They were sent to her anonymously via UPS with a letter that basically said that it wasn't fair and she had the right to be upset.
Darn right, whoever that did that.
So I think she thinks it was the Assistant Attorney General, but she didn't name him in the book because it wasn't legal.
Yeah.
He wasn't supposed to do that. And she wrote the book, I think, in 1987 or 89 or something like that, I think. Sharon's family, including her children, supported her interest in speaking. But the one person who did not was the person she thought she would have been able to lean on the most, her husband, Wayne. Wayne had had difficulty since the beginning. He'd become more and more quiet and withdrawn as the weeks and the months went by. He had become angry and resentful, and he moved out of the house in November of 1981. When someone asked her if the attack itself caused issues within the marriage, Sharon said that she wasn't sure when their love turned to complacency, but she thought it had happened over a period of time and had finally just come to a head. When he came to her in the hospital after the attack, he told her, quote, "I never realized how much I needed you," end quote. She said that phrasing in that situation was a red flag. She'd been missing at that point for around 18 hours. When he came to see her, 18 hours had passed. They didn't know where she'd been. He finally knew she was there. She was alive. But he didn't talk to her about love. He said he needed her. The issue with that was that she could no longer be the person that she'd been before.
Right.
So, although she tried, she was still different as a wife, as a mother, as a person. There were more things in their lives where she and the children would rely on him now instead of on her.
Mm-hmm.
There was just no way around that. Sharon faced her blindness with a grace and determination that I doubt many of us could duplicate. In her book, the only time she mentions feeling sad about her blindness is when she thought about the fact that she wouldn't get to see her children as they grew. She had moments of sadness and loss, but she never pitied herself or felt bitter. She never actually directed rage at Rossi, at this man who'd, taken so much from her for no freaking reason. I think I'm angrier than she was.
Yeah.
She actually told people that he took 13 hours from her and her sight, and she was not going to give him anything more.
What a badass.
I know, badass. But her battles and continued survival were far from over. Instead of the symptoms of PTSD that we've come to hear about on TV and stuff, panic attacks, nightmares, flashbacks, Sharon's survival is more about the way that her newfound blindness affected her life going forward. She'd made it through the events that had changed her situation in such a drastic way, but now she had to find out a way to make that change her new normal. And although she faced it head on with a realistic but optimistic view, she also felt the stress. Much of the stress actually came from other people's expectations of what her life would be and how they expected her to feel or act. Most people, from family members to complete strangers, asked her how long it took to come out of the depression, or how long did it take to get over the anger. And many would find out that she was blind and start speaking more loudly as if she couldn't hear rather than not being able to see. Even the Division of Blind Services, who deal with those with varying degrees of vision loss and blindness every day, presumed to know her needs better than she did. They tried to sign her up for their services, but not all the programs and products were appropriate for her situation. For example, in their very first meeting, they gave her tapes that had tips on inside mobility, how to brush her teeth, how to take a shower, how to wash her hair. But Sharon had been home from the hospital for about a month at that point. She'd already taught herself how to do those things. They also told her that they would teach her how to read Braille and how to sign her name as a blind person.
Mm-hmm.
And they explained to her that she would forget how to write in a few months anyway, so she didn't have to worry about that. Sharon could still sign her name the usual way, and she didn't see a need to use Braille. She decided she could take notes on a tape recorder and listen to radio, TV, and books on tape. She didn't have the time nor the inclination to learn a new system of language and reading when she knew she could rely on cassette recorders. She told them she didn't want to learn Braille, basically. She didn't need to. She described their meeting as, quote, their own agenda and their own way of justifying themselves to their funding sources, end quote. They insisted she participate in a program given by the Rehabilitative Services of Daytona Beach. This program would mean she would take a 14-week trip to Daytona, and they would teach her independent living skills, how to use a guide dog, and even how to cross a 4-lane highway by herself. Sharon pointed out in her book that she didn't cross 4-lane highways as a pedestrian when she had 20/20 vision. There was no reason for her to do it as a blind person. And a dog was out of the question. Mark's allergies were terrible. It was part of the reason they moved to Florida. She's like, we can't have a dog. She also told them there was no way she could leave her kids for 14 weeks. She asked if they provided care for the kids for that time, and they told her no. They only took care of the blind person, not the family of the blind person.
Horrible.
Yeah. So some of the products they could provide were useful, like measuring cups that had raised markers for touch instead of sight.
Mm-hmm.
But Sharon felt as though they didn't have her specific needs in mind. She said their name was apt. They were the Division of Blind Services because they had no vision. They were, in no way, the Division of Services for blind people. I love the way that's phrased.
Oh my gosh. I think
Yeah.
I love her.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not the only battle she had to fight. So, having lost her job, she began drawing Social Security income. When she applied for disability benefits, she had to wait 5 months before she could get her first check, so that they could prove that her disability was permanent, despite the proof that the doctor said she would never get her vision back. She lost her eyes, but she had to wait 5 months for a check because they had to ensure that her disability was permanent.
There's all sorts of screwed up.
I know. It's government crap. So at first she had set up her checks to be sent with Wayne as the payee. So it would be her Social Security checks, but sent to him under his name. So because it was easier. He had a car. He could drive to the bank to deposit them. But after their marriage fractured, Sharon went to the closest Social Security office to get the payee changed back to herself. The woman at the office told her she would need to get a letter from her psychologist stating that Sharon was capable of handling her finances herself. She told her, after all, there had to be a reason that the checks were sent to her husband, so it must mean she was incapable of handling her own money. And she couldn't just change it back for her simply because she'd been asked. Sharon explained rationally that she was blind, and the checks had only listed Wayne as the payee out of convenience, but now they were in the process of divorcing, and it was no longer convenient. The woman refused to freaking budge. So Sharon, who still wasn't one to cause a scene, laid everything on the line. She told her exactly how she'd come to need those disability checks, and she said she did not leave out one gruesome detail. The woman was actually in tears by the end of the story. She knows this because her mom was with her at the time, and went and got a supervisor's approval to change the payee on her checks. Of course, this being a government-related entity, the checks still didn't come right at first. In fact, from January to June, they were wrong. It took 6 months, but they finally figured it out.
Oh my gosh.
It was like varying. It would come and it would be in his name, and it would come and it would be in her name, but it was like they missed one, or it was just screwy. So there were also times that were funny, like when her 4-year-old Kristen snuck 10 bags of chocolate chip cookies into the grocery cart, and the cashier called her on it. And times it started sad but then turned magical, like when Kristen held her mom's hand during 4th of July fireworks and traced the pattern of fireworks on her palm and then described the colors to her.
Shut up right this second.
Right. She would trace them so they'd know what shape the fireworks were in and then tell her what colors they were. And then there was the time that she reconnected with Ray DiUsanio. There's a guy that she went to high school with that she hadn't really known well back then. But he became the loving, supportive, strong partner she dreamt of having. Ray moved to Florida on September 22nd, 1982, having fallen in love with Sharon over the summer while she was visiting her parents in Ohio.
Aww.
He didn't fall in love with her for what she could do for him or the needs she could fill for him. He fell in love with her, the woman, the mother of 3, the baton twirler in high school, and the blind woman with the pretty blue eyes. And that goes beyond a story of survival. That's the story of a woman who has thrived. That's the story of Sharon Komlos, whose name is actually Sharon DiUsanio or whatever, because they did get married.
What an amazing woman.
I know. It gives me chills still. Like, to make it through all of that, just the attack and everything, to trust someone again for a moment just to be able to go to the hospital. Like, it wasn't the same voice, but it could have been somebody else to take advantage of her.
Yeah.
But she had to trust somebody. She could not do it on her own. And then dealing with the Division of Blind Services, the Social Security checks,
her husband at the
everything.
time.
There were a lot of little stories. Her book was really good. It's called Field of Laughter. There were a lot of stories about afterward and the expectations people had, the way people treated her.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, like I mentioned, said that they asked her how long her depression lasted. She never really felt the depression. She knew in the moment almost that she was blind. When the doctors explained it to her, it's like they thought she didn't get it.
Right.
Because she was so calm about it.
She didn't respond the way they expected her to.
They were just like, you know, like the ophthalmologist was actually like frustrated and kind of rude at first. And she realized, he came back later and apologized, and he's like, I've never had somebody react to the news like that the way that you did. I thought you weren't understanding what I was saying. And he was frustrated because he could not help her. There was nothing he could do. And so he was frustrated with the situation, with himself. He was worried that she didn't understand that she was permanently blind. And I mean, to see nothing, not shapes or colors or light or variations of light.
That is so scary to
Yeah.
think of.
And all she thought about when she was on her way to the hospital was her kids and what she was going to tell the police. It's amazing.
And to do all of that with grace. And to
Yeah.
get to the hospital and then be able to make a joke.
Yeah. She said that when the UPS box came with all the court transcripts in it,
Mm-hmm.
her son Mark, who was I think like a year or two older at that point, the middle child, he read the letter that came with it about, basically you're right and that's why I did this, And he's like, Mom, what is all this? And she said, this is over 1,000 pages. This is what happened in court. And she's like, she basically made a joke about him reading it to her. And he was like, what? She's like, I'm just kidding. You don't have to read all this. He's like, oh, thank God. But the kids would read the mail to her. And like the trip to the grocery store that one time was because they usually relied on like friends or neighbors or would get a taxi or something to go places. But usually to the grocery store, somebody would usually go with her. And she was like, well, this time there was nobody available. So I called a cab and we went and got groceries. And so when they got up to the counter, the cashier's like, Sharon, I know that you care about your kids' nutrition. I think 10 bags of chocolate chip cookies is just a little too much. And she said she immediately knew who it was. She's like, Kristen. so she had funny moments. And then that thing about the fireworks and her little 3-year-old.
So sweet.
Tracing the colors. And then she said as the finale started to come, it was like, they would go faster and faster so she couldn't trace them anymore. So she would, like, her and I think a cousin were standing there, and they were jumping up and down and just yelling, red, green, blue, yellow, like, just telling her the colors, and just hearing their excitement and stuff. And listening, like, she was sad at Christmas at first because she couldn't see the lights and she couldn't see the presents. And,
yeah.
But the kids, like, they just kind of almost naturally knew. And they would explain to her when they opened stuff. They're like, look, Mom, they got me, blah, blah, blah. And they tell her what they got and describe it to her and let her touch it and feel the toy and stuff. So she knew what it felt like. And I mean, she basically told them when she came home from the hospital, she said, I can't see, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, it's more important that you're here. And she said that she basically told them, you're going to have to be careful about not leaving stuff laying around. Toys in the aisles and stuff like that. And she said for the most part they did good, She was like,
sounds like she's raised her kids to be like her.
Yeah.
So
they
just
were
second nature.
Extremely supportive and sweet, and they went to her speeches. I don't know what happened with her husband, but he said the speeches were stupid and that she was crazy for doing them. And so I think it was almost like she was getting so much attention.
Well, he just didn't
handle it, but he didn't have his little lady at home. Yeah.
Yeah, he was going to have to do something.
Yeah, he was having to pick up the kids from daycare. He was having to take them to doctor's appointments. He was having to do all the things that she always did that a lot of the time moms do, plus even when they work full time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not sure, but she didn't go into a lot of detail about him, but they ended up
good. I don't care about him.
There was a custody battle for a while because he said she wasn't capable of taking care of the kids because she was blind, but she'd been taking care of them. So that went back and forth a couple of times, and but eventually she got custody of the kids. And
what an awful person!
Or they shared custody. I'm not sure which, but like I don't know how. I guess he probably hung around as long as he did just because he probably felt guilty, but. Because of what she'd gone through, but he just couldn't handle it. So, but she's a badass. She just was a superstar. It's insane. The first time I read about her, I was like, wait, she what? The fact that she stopped the car without hitting something or running off the road
and
was
her
amazing.
Faculties about her.
Yeah.
to be able to, like, think about what
To
she
think,
needed
am
to
I
do.
in shock? Do I have brain damage? No, I'm thinking clearly. I can move my hands. I can move my feet. I'm, like, and then trying to tell her rescuer, and if he had been a normal person, it would have been a rescuer. My name is this. Like, she was worried after her attack and everything, and she actually did get to the hospital. She's like, he knows my name. He knows where I live. He knows my kids' names.
Mm-hmm.
Because she told him all that information thinking he was going to tell the doctors and nurses for her in case she lost consciousness. Luckily, he was a dumbass and they found him. But,
And he was, like, childlike, like you were saying.
yeah, he was, I don't know.
I wonder what was up with him.
I don't know, but he was weird, and he had done this to someone else, and he wasn't even in jail long enough to...
That's what's so crazy,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. And I don't know, one of the things that they talk about on the Morbid podcast, which I friggin' love, is that a lot of the time, if somebody basically gets attacked and the person tries to kill them, but they survive, the criminal doesn't get that much time. And they're like, basically, they get rewarded because I managed to survive. Like, they're like, if they intended to kill the person, but the person survived, they should still get the amount of time they would have gotten if they had killed them.
See, now I've seen it the opposite, where they did get more time because the person survived longer, and because of the stress and
the emotional and stuff.
Yeah,
like you can do civil suits and get like monetary compensation, but most of the time they're in jail and can't pay that.
Well, this was a criminal thing.
Yeah.
I actually know of someone that something happened.
Really?
And this person got more time because the victim
went through the trauma later. Yeah.
So, but back then,
sometimes they'll also get plea deals. I think that's a lot of when it happens, they'll plea out, like make a plea deal and get like assault and battery charges or something below attempted murder.
Right.
But it's like they tried to kill this person, and the only reason that they're still alive is because they happened to survive.
Yeah.
That the criminal didn't do it right.
But it's because of that's messed up. Because if someone gets assaulted or whatever and they survive, there's so much distress and pain.
Yeah.
Emotional pain.
And then physical disabilities and stuff. Hospital bills. And
it's like
the whole family. She was like, I wasn't the only victim. It's like my parents, my kids, my husband, we were all victims of this.
Yeah.
It affected everyone's lives.
Gosh, what an amazing person, an amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
Her grit.
Yeah.
She has like a backbone of steel.
Yeah.
Like
just determined. She was like,
and especially for a woman during that time period.
Yeah.
Like now, what we're talking about and what we were like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like you could tell when we were talking, when you would say something that it was stupid.
Yeah.
That people were doing
like the freaking
this,
fact that she couldn't be in the courtroom.
Right.
It's like she's the victim of the crime.
It's like now we're like, what? That's crazy. But back then that was just the way it went.
Yeah. Exactly.
But for her to be like, this is messed up.
Yeah.
And want to fight it, maybe not be able to at that time, but
yeah.
Gosh. Man, what an amazing story. It changed her entire
life. So, and I mean, the motivational speaking circuit thing was kind of big back then.
Yeah.
And people still do it to an extent. That's why there are TED Talks, but
Yeah.
But
that was before social media.
She ended up she actually called Crime Stoppers after she heard about it on TV. And, Crime Stoppers, again, that's something that, like, you hear all the time.
Yeah.
Like, if you listen to Crime Junkie or whatever, a lot of the time at the end, they'll be like, if you know anything, you can call the Crime Stoppers at this, or you can do whatever.
Yeah.
And each state pretty much has a different variation of it and stuff like that. Back then, it was brand new.
Yeah.
And so she called them, and she got in touch with somebody, and she was like, basically, this is my story, and I want to help. And the man was like, okay. And so he was like, let me call you back. And she got off the phone and she's like, he's not going to call me back. Whatever. Okay. Yeah. It was just like a whim that she called and she's like, I want to do something. He called her back. She ended up on the board of the Crime Stoppers in Florida.
Oh, wow.
She ended up working for a victim's advocate and like different government positions and like courts and I don't know, like all kinds of different stuff. So she made a living out of it and just kept on.
Wow.
It's insane.
She's such an inspiration for others who are victims.
Yeah.
And maybe not even the same severity or just a different kind.
Right.
That you can still live and, like you said, thrive.
Yeah.
Even when your entire life is turned upside down.
And I mean, her book was, it started out basically like on May 22nd, 1980. I mean, it just like went straight into the crime. And it was so matter of fact.
Yeah.
The information about the rape and how she was raped, she didn't go into detail. But the fact that there was, you know, anal rape involved, just the fact that she was raped at all, and she just told the doctors, oh, by the way, he also raped me. Like, women then wouldn't, it's hard now.
Well, like you said,
it's hard now to tell somebody that.
The victims were blamed, and even now it happens.
Yeah. But she was just like, no, this is what he did to me. And she wasn't afraid, and she wasn't embarrassed by it. She was just like, he did this. This was
I didn't
not
do
my
this.
fault.
Yeah.
It's like the only reason she was driving late was because she'd already spent the whole day working, fed her kids, went to take her brother's girlfriend to see the sights, and then was going home. And it was a road that she drove all the time. And he just happened to see her.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's scary.
It is scary because it shows you that sometimes it is just a random thing. It can be out of your control. The most we can do is just be as safe as we can.
I mean, really.
Because otherwise you would just stay in your home all the time and hide.
And even then, that doesn't mean nothing will happen.
Exactly, yeah.
We just have to live so we can live and enjoy life.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Motivational speakers over here.
I know. Yeah.
What a great story, though.
She's very inspiring and it's great. I kind of wish that she still did speeches, honestly. Right? I wouldn't mind going to see her talk.
Would mind her coming on our podcast.
I know, right? So yeah, and I looked to see if she had any social media or anything like that, but I didn't see anything. So
yeah.
Under her new married name or her maiden name or anything, but she was amazing. So what a wonderful story it was. And obviously parts of it weren't, but overall it is really an inspiring story. So
wow. Thank you for bringing us that story. It was horrendous, but also, like you said, very inspiring at the end, and that makes me happy.
Yeah.
We got the guy.
Yeah. He got 104 years in prison.
He'll never leave the prison.
Yeah.
That's great. She found a good guy.
Yes.
Her kids love her. She loves her kids. It's great.
Yeah, they're, like I said, that's more than survival.
She's helping
thriving.
Other people.
She's helping other people. She's doing the damn thing.
Yeah.
That's what she is. She's a bad bitch.
Yes, she is.
We should make t-shirts that say, I want to be like Sharon.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Maybe a sticker.
Well, I've talked myself out now, so if anybody wants to look up the book, again, it's called Feel the Laughter. It'll be in the show notes, of course, and along with some other articles and stuff. But I don't think she's in the public eye as much anymore. She, you know, like I said, the motivational speaking thing was in the 80s and stuff.
Yeah.
But she wrote the book in 87 or 89, I can't remember. And by that time, she and Ray had gotten together, and he basically just moved in. He moved to Florida to be with her and the kids. So.
I love it.
Yeah.
We'll say, Bev, what if somebody wants to get in touch with us? What should they do?
They should email us at triggerwarning411@gmail.com.
Shut your mouth. That sounds fantastic.
I know, it does. That was not planned, and I loved it.
It wasn't, but I was just like, wow, we haven't reminded them of how to talk to us.
Yet. We should do that again.
We did.
Oh, we did.
We just did it. Yay. No, really, guys.
We are pros.
We are so good at this.
Yeah. So anyway, join us next week for another stirring story.
About something.
I don't know what's coming next.
Crime.
I don't have the list
mysteries,
in front of us.
Survival.
Yeah. It could
we
be
don't know.
any of those things.
So you better come back.
That's
tune
right.
in to find out what we're talking about next week.
Yes, do that. And welcome to the second season again.
Yay, season 2.
Yay. Okay. We'll talk to you guys later.
And don't forget, guys, watch for deer.